application developer who is deploying to Kubernetes need to understand Kubernetes? There's been two kind of different schools of thought here. I'm in one of them. I'm wondering what other people are.
How many people are responsible for the Kubernetes environment is always my question.
Yeah, I think that's a factor. It's like how large is the organization and the team behind this, and how many layers are there in between? Like, if that application developer is in no way going to be able to influence anything going on in that cluster because that's culturally how it is, then yeah, I don't think that's a value add for that developer to know the internals of Kubernetes. But if he's going to be ultimately responsible for jumping on at 3 a.m. to respond to a service outage, yeah, I think there needs to be some overlap. Not for everybody. There will be certain people on the team who just do not get it or do not want to get it, and you're not
Yeah.
going to force that. But enabling engineers who want to learn it, yeah, I agree.
It's been my gripe with some of the tools that um, try to make Kubernetes easier by providing this layer on top of it. That I'm trying to remember the name of, one or two of them. I'm blanking on them right now.
Well, you
But
got Mesos, the guys from D2,
OpenShift,
IQ,
Rancher, and all of these.
Rancher.
I'm not talking about like I'm not really talking about that level. I'm talking about um, like turn Kubernetes into this you know ridiculously easy to use app deployment platform where you just all you have to do is this teeny tiny little thing and click a
Yeah,
couple of buttons and boom, there you go.
yeah.
Um, and my gripe with them is like that's great until something's not working and you got to get into the internals.
I think everybody should understand kubectl. Like everybody should understand the API. That was where I started. Like, I read I met with Eric a month ago, and we've only been working as an organization with Kubernetes for 4 months. And this is like my first involvement in containers in an organization level, like for an enterprise. So yeah, I think understanding the API and then all the stuff that you're frustrated with, Eric, Jeremy alluded to, like you got to read the deployment config, like you got to know where are they deploying it from, how are they bootstrapping the nodes, like what's the process around, their application, what are the annotations, what is it actually doing? Because like I've realized that what I'm reading is not always what I'm interpreting the system to do. So I need somebody to show me like what's actually happening, whoever built it.
Yeah. No, I think
I
that
mean, actually know what the
that's a
fuck you're
natural
talking
evolution.
about.
Go on.
Yes.
That means
Shippa.
reading Kubernetes.
That was the tool I was trying to remember the name of. Shippa, SHIPA.
Okay. Yeah. So here's my here's what I struggle with this because as systems integrators helping customers implement these solutions, inevitably we add some abstractions because nobody in their right mind is running Kubernetes at scale and just doing kubectl on resources that were all written by hand. Or if they are, I think they're few and far between. So, so then it's like, which abstraction are you going to choose? Are you going to choose the one that OpenShift wants you to have, or Rancher, or Shippa, or these others? And then there's smaller layers, smaller types of abstractions, like Helm, perhaps. You're going to at least deploy that way. Um, and then we have another abstraction, like if you're using Helm, then we're using Helm file. So some of the criticisms I've heard is like, I don't understand how this is all working. There's so many layers. And I am sensitive to that feeling of being overwhelmed, especially when you come into this ecosystem and there's so much new to learn. But to be able to do anything repeatably and consistently and scalable across all the services you want to do in your team, there's gonna be there's gonna have to be abstractions. And I hate the criticism of abstractions themselves, um, uh, because we all do them, and it's we need to be introspective about that.
I guess my criticism is not of the abstractions themselves. It's the concept of, because you are using this abstraction, you don't need to know how the underlying stuff works. That is my criticism.
That's true. And it gets really hard to understand how all the other stuff works when you're buying into an end-to-end vendor solution for how to do everything. We're talking like monitoring, logging, deployment, testing, etc. So what our strategy has been more is, how do we come up with a strategy to bundle all the different types of best of breed products that do different things, either from individual vendors or open source vendors, into one solution, rather than picking one vendor that does it all for you. And then you can't swap one thing out with the next, because you have to know how their entire complex, framework works.
But you still even have issues with that. Like I was listening to you on one of the office hours about Prometheus, and trying to find the best version to deploy.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. But the good thing is that, like, the good and the bad with that, the good is that it's limited to that one vendor, and it doesn't block every other initiative that we're working on. It blocks that one initiative, and we can still stick with what we're on. But the bad news is, that we are therefore at the mercy of multiple vendors and them changing their interfaces and how you set them up and deploy. And that is a pain.
I would say that the developers should understand the Kubernetes abstractions, and
that's good.
That the implementation of those abstractions should be hidden from them and beyond their scope. Or, I mean, they can learn whatever they want, and at some point those abstractions break down and they need to know why they have to do some stupid thing, like whatever. Fortunately, I can't come up with a good example right now, but that's the whole point of the abstractions, just like the point of an operating system, right? At some point, you have to know how what an inode is and how file locks are implemented. But really, you shouldn't. And you shouldn't be encouraging people to learn how these things work because that leads them down the path of breaking those abstractions and making choices that will break later when the underlying implementation changes, even if the abstraction doesn't. And Kubernetes is doing that every 3 months now.
Yeah,
I definitely agree with that.
yeah,
for
that's
sure.
a really good point, Jeremy.
I don't want my people, worrying about, Creo versus Containerd versus Docker or whatever. I just want them to understand this is a pod. This is how to get logs out of your containers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So one thing, I'm not sure if this would help anyone on the call, but I went through a bit of transformation recently in my org. We're working on quite a bit of a new greenfield project. It was originally brought on to this current team to help them be their build and release engineer. It's kind of like their DevOps guy. Hey, give me your code, I'll ship it for you. Obviously, that doesn't scale too well. It's kind of miserable too. And so with this new project, I had proven out Kubernetes within this org. Like, all right, Kubernetes is the future. And on this new project, we took the approach of onboarding the developers to actually deploy using either kubectl or Helm charts. And we built minor abstractions using Helm charts and just provided them with documentation. And they would come back, ask questions to me and my team about, how do I get my logs, or how do I do this one-off thing, and getting them more comfortable. So a little bit of hand-holding. I can honestly say it took about 4 weeks, and now we have the whole team onboarded onto Kubernetes at a level I would not have expected. They've kind of taken over my job, which is awesome because now I could go focus on other things. But we're looking at, in terms of tooling, we're also looking at using like Argo CD. That's high on the list right now, and getting that out the door. And it's a very, once you understand Helm, you can easily go to Argo CD. It's a very same concepts, but it's in a UI, and it doesn't feel like that bad of an abstraction. I'm sure some people here may disagree, of course, but that's kind of the approach that I've taken my org, and it's worked out really well. Just literally giving the developer documentation on how to grab the logs, as well as how to deploy using a Helm chart, and providing them with the base Helm charts, and kind of taking what's on the interwebs, because there's quite a bit of information around Kubernetes and Helm and everything. My team to this day does not understand how the autoscaler works or some of the other stuff that occurs behind the scenes. From my perspective, I don't think they should ever understand that. Like, there isn't much of a need. There might be benefit later. We're not necessarily too focused on some of the optimizations around Kubernetes, but the minimum goal that we had in mind, at least for the short term, was getting them deploying code on their own without someone like myself being heavily involved. And so, yeah, I hope that helps in terms of an approach if anyone's going through.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, you got to have different approaches for different people. You got to have different strokes for different folks. Like, some people, so at Script where I work, we have some teams that have SREs on the team, and those teams, all they need is an AWS account. They don't need anything else from us. Like, cause they'll just run the show. All they want is access. There are other teams, however, that really need a lot more hand-holding, because they have maybe not staffed with SREs. Maybe they have not so many senior engineers. Maybe they only have junior engineers. And for those people, the abstractions must be much stronger, right? So we have to build stuff for those people. I want to make a book recommendation, actually. It's a book called Team Topologies. It's a really great book. It's in the IT Revolution Press kind of family of books. But one of the key concepts there is this idea of cognitive loading. And I also posted a Rich Hickey talk about simple versus easy, simple made easy. So I'm sure some of you have seen it. But and he talks about this idea of cognitive loading. One of the things is that people can only think about so much, and especially if they're new, they're a junior developer. All they can think about is like kind of like the fundamentals, right? And if you throw the whole stack at them, they're not gonna get it. They're not gonna be productive. They're just gonna, like, active heap overflow, and then you're gonna get killered. So yeah, it's about right sizing and kind of having different approaches, tailoring your approach for how much platform you build, right? It can't, for some people, it's going to be all they need is very custom solution. So they need the full stack. And other people, they need handholding. They need the guardrails. They need the very opinionated systems. And you can have both in infrastructure. I think you have to nowadays.
I was just going to mention guardrails too. That's good. I had the same. I've been through the same very similar approach of, get them deploying their own stuff to Kubernetes. What I've learned though is that you need to put in, admission controllers or something for, like, specifically ingresses or services of type load balancer, because we had people, creating databases and putting load balancers in front of them, and it's like, no, don't do that. Like, your database is now completely open to the public.
That's a great point. Fortunately, it's still a pretty small team, but we have a formal agreement of, let's not do anything stateful yet. We're running purely stateless workloads and leveraging our RDS and the other nicer, like, more friendly technologies of, like, AWS to do it, like, for any database or NoSQL stuff at the moment. But yeah, that's actually a good point. It hasn't bid as yet, but I'm sure that's around the corner, especially as we're ramping up our team in the coming months. Someone come in, I'll provision a load balancer, and before I know it, it's going to be a lot of load balancers.
Yeah, we've gotten to this point where it's kind of nice that the team can do whatever they want until they need to create the ingress, and then they put a ticket in or whatever. Okay, I want this ingress. All right, looks good. Let's do it.
Yeah, it makes sense. All right. Well, that was a really interesting conversation.